What's going on, team? I got a lot of encouraging feedback on my post about my hiring manager experience with the 400 plus applications. So I thought I'd do a follow up in case there's interest in kind of discussing this further, especially as it relates to new things that I've observed as a hiring manager. And so I've got 5 things for you to think about that may not be obvious to you as a job applicant, but are useful to know, hopefully. So first is that applying early is really, really important. So, there is a point where the hiring manager or the recruiting team, they have enough applicants, and they have, let's say you have 400 applicants. You cannot interview, even if it's the top 10%. You can't interview 40 of them. Maybe you can interview 10, 15 of them. And so once they get through, let's say, the first 100 applicants, and maybe they find 10 or 15 that they think they can interview, chances are they're not going to be focused on applicant 401, even if they're amazing, that they're going to, that's going to show up in the inbox a week later. So first suggestion is, if you see a job that you're interested in, try and apply maybe the first day, certainly in the first few days. Don't wait. Don't be like, oh, that looks like a cool job. Maybe I'll apply for that later. If you apply for that later, even if you're like, oh, look, the post is still up a month later, there's a good chance they are fully on with the first batch of applicants, and maybe they'll consider you as a backup to a backup, but not super high probability. And that's already in a low probability kind of game to begin with. The second tip is headlines. So the way the LinkedIn hiring manager interface works is you can kind of scroll through the applicants without clicking on any of their specific application data, and you just look at their, the name and the headline. And the headline might say like, oh, for me, it might be, former Google PM director, 2X founder, whatever, Harvard MBA. And those are the things that can really catch a recruiter's attention. I know not everybody has those blue chip names. That's fine. Most of us don't. So even if you don't have the blue chip name, if, let's say for my role that I had posted, people had a headline that said product management, aspiring product manager with experience in early product discovery, I would be like, oh, that's kind of cool. So headlines are super important. And if the headlines are kind of generic, or even worse, not relevant to the job posting, then you're kind of screwed. That might be like a hidden trade-off you got to make on your LinkedIn kind of headline. Like, are you going to try and go general and be appealing to a lot of different roles that you're applying for? Or do you want to go really specific, maybe have a higher conversion rate, but limit the breadth of jobs you can apply for? So something to think about. The third thing is, what I did for this posting was I had so many applicants that I ended up asking them to do homework. And, it's funny, years ago, people would get pissed if you asked them to do homework. But I think there's more of a willingness to do it now. Probably speaks to the job market, but also, maybe candidates feel like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to shine or stand out or offset the lack of kind of, blue chip logos on the resume. So with regards to homework, definitely do a bang up job on it. If you just fill out the homework, it'll be obvious to the recruiting team or hiring manager. And if you do it, go above and beyond what they're asking you to do on the homework, I almost feel obligated to invite them for a first round interview, because I'm like, wow, if they put this kind of time into the homework, I should definitely talk to them. Now, is there a risk that you could do all of this effort and spend all this time on the homework and still the recruiting team kind of like scrolls past you? That is a risk for sure. But that's true with anything in the job search kind of experience. Like, you may just need to be okay with 80% of your effort never seeing the light of day, but the 20% of the time that it does, if you go above and beyond, like, you'll probably double, triple your odds. Fourth thing that I've noticed in my early round interviews now is you want to find this balance of being concise, but still leaned in. So what I've noticed is some of the people applying, they're either like super concise and they don't go super deep, in which case I might interpret it as like, okay, they kind of are interested, but they're not like, this is not their top choice, or they're not like super fired up about it. And on the other extreme, there are folks who are super fired up, but they end up sort of going way over. So if we have like a 20-minute interview, like they'll spend 10 minutes on their introduction. And you really want to kind of dial that in. So it's a balance. If it's too short, you kind of don't look interested. If it's too long, you're interested, but then you raise concerns about, okay, well, will this candidate be able to communicate efficiently? And that is obviously a big requirement for a product management opportunity. And then the last tip is be persistent. There are definitely folks who will follow the letter of what you're asking them to do, and they're great. And then there are others who are like, do that and follow up proactively, provide more information, whatever. Maybe a bonus tip number 6 is, yes, thank you notes after an interview, they can't hurt, and certainly like they put you back on the radar. In some ways, the hiring individual or interviewer will make their decision minutes after they close that Google Meet or Zoom window. And so whatever you say to them hours later in your thank you note, like, may not change the rating and the recommendation they fill out. And so my suggestion would be actually think about the pre-interview outreach. So let's say you get invited for an interview next Thursday. You may want to send them a note on Monday or Tuesday saying, hey, I'm really excited about my interview with you on Thursday. I want to provide some additional information about why I'm really kind of stoked about this role, or I wanted to provide a link to a artifact that is related to the activities that this job would require. And the reason why you want to do that maybe before the interview is like you're still in a position in that window of influence of the interviewer's kind of decision. Whereas like the thank you notes after the interview, like whenever I get them, I'm like, oh yeah, that was nice. And I will definitely remember them. It's definitely better than not doing it. But let's say if I put a rating of a candidate as leaning no higher, and then they send me the nice thank you letter, even if it's super detailed, like I'm not going to go back and change the rating. Whereas if they sent me something before the interview, I might go into the interview with more material that I can probe and maybe, have a slightly more positive inclination about that candidate. So that's not always possible. Sometimes you don't get the names of the people that you're interviewing with, or they don't give you their email address, but you could always hit them up on LinkedIn. And again, maybe 80% of the time they're not going to see it, or they're not going to see it in time. But 20% of the time, if they do, a good pre-interview outreach might boost your chances like another 30-40%. So hopefully this is helpful. For those of you who are in the product management world and are struggling with product reviews, just as an FYI, I'm teaching a class on Maven in a couple of weeks. And then I'm thinking about doing a class maybe in July around kind of an introduction to product management for non-PMs who want to get into product management or just are starting in product management. I've hesitated from putting on such a class because I feel like, oh my God, like, does the world need another PM bootcamp? But I've had enough people asking me about it that I'm thinking, well, maybe we should do it. My style would be very interactive. I'd bring a lot of firsthand experience as a PM and as a manager of PMs and a PM coach from startup and big tech experience. So that could be interesting. But let me know in the comments below if you'd be interested in that PM bootcamp class for kind of early career or aspiring PMs. But back to the original tips. Number 1, apply early. That's probably like the most impactful thing you can do. Second is optimize your headlines on your LinkedIn profile for the job and be strategic about how specific you want to be. Number 3 is if you're given homework and you really want the job, go above and beyond. Number 4 is when you get the interview, try and be concise, but show you're interested. So you don't want to be standoffish and be like super short and like, oh, I'm not gonna beg for this job, because I do see people kind of overcorrect. And then I've also seen the other one where they're like really interested in the opportunity and they talk forever and ever. And so you want to find that balance. And then number 5 is be persistent. Follow up and pre-follow up. Maybe that's the terminology we should use. Hope that's useful. Get back to work, team. See ya.